decline, and legacy of the Silk Road. Nothing in history is eternal, and by the late 15th century, the Silk Road's overland trade began to wither. Several factors contributed to its decline, fundamentally changing global commerce and interaction. Political fragmentation, changing economic priorities, and new routes of exploration all combined to, in effect, close the Silk Road after a lifespan of over 1,500 years. One key blow was the collapse of the Mongol Empire. By the mid-14th century, China threw off Mongol rule. The Yuan dynasty was replaced by the native Ming dynasty in 1368. The Ming emperors, wary of nomadic threats, adopted a more inward-looking stance and reinforced China's defenses, like rebuilding and extending the Great Wall even further. They maintained trade with Central Asia, but on a much smaller scale than under the Mongols. Meanwhile, in Central Asia itself, Mongol successor states, like the Chagatai Khanate, fragmented, and new conquerors, such as Tamerlane, Timur, rose and fell, causing disruption. After Timur's death in 1405, his empire split and instability reigned along some Silk Road segments. Without a powerful, unified authority guaranteeing safe passage, the old risks of banditry and local warfare returned with a vengeance. Caravans now had to navigate a patchwork of territories, each with its own tolls, laws, and dangers. The Silk Road became less reliable and more expensive. The coup de grace came from the west, the rise of the Ottoman Empire. In 1453, the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople, extinguishing the Byzantine Empire. The Ottomans, now controlling the traditional western terminus of the Silk Road as well as key routes through the Middle East, imposed high tariffs and boycotts on trade with Europe. Some sources even say the Ottomans effectively closed the routes between East and West after taking Constantinople. While in reality, trade did not cease overnight, the Ottomans' domination of Middle Eastern trade routes posed a serious challenge to European merchants. European powers, especially the Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa, had long profited as intermediaries funneling Asian goods to Europe via Constantinople, Alexandria, and other ports. Now, the Ottomans controlled those choke points and could charge hefty sums or block trade as a political tool. Faced with this obstacle, Europeans began looking for alternative pathways to the riches of the East. Thus was born the Age of Discovery, in many ways an attempt to find a Sea Silk Road to bypass the overland route and its intermediaries. In 1492, Columbus sailed westward from Spain, hoping to reach the Indies, South and East Asia, by sea, inadvertently discovering the Americas instead. A few years later, in 1498, Vasco da Gama of Portugal successfully sailed around Africa's Cape of Good Hope and reached India by sea. These expeditions were directly driven by the desire to access spices, silk, and other Asian goods without going through Muslim middlemen. Once oceanic routes were established, trade patterns shifted dramatically. Sea freight could carry goods cheaper and in larger bulk than caravans overland, and European ships armed with cannons could relatively easily dominate maritime trade. By the 16th century, the old caravan roads saw dwindling traffic as Chinese silk and Indian spices traveled by ship to Europe around Africa. The Silk Road's importance receded. It was simply more efficient for Europeans to sail to Asian ports than to trek to Cathay. China itself abetted this shift. Interestingly, in the early 15th century, the Ming admiral Zheng He led massive treasure fleets on voyages through the South China Sea and Indian Ocean, 1405, 1433, reaching as far as Africa. These showpiece expeditions demonstrated the feasibility of controlled sea trade from China's end. But soon after Zheng He's voyages, the Ming emperors turned inward and curtailed maritime trade as well, instituting a policy of isolation, the Haijin, or sea ban. They focused on defending their northern borders against renewed Mongol pressure, and the idea of actively maintaining far-flung trade networks waned. This meant China was not actively investing in keeping the Silk Road alive, and, combined with the European pivot to the seas, it spelled further reduction in overland trade. By the late 1500s, many segments of the Silk Road were quiet. Ancient cities like Palmyra and Persepolis were ruins. Others like Samarkand and Bukhara remained inhabited but had lost their international luster, becoming more regional trade centers under Uzbek or Persian rulers. The Silk Road had always been somewhat decentralized and shifting. When one route became dangerous, merchants used alternatives. For example, if warfare blocked the route through Persia, traders might go north of the Caspian. But now it was a broad collapse in demand for any overland route as global maritime trade took over. The very concept of an interconnected overland road faded from awareness. In a sense, the Silk Road went dormant. Interestingly, the term Silk Road itself was only coined in the 19th century by geographer Ferdinand von Richthofen. During the interim centuries, people did not think of a single Silk Road. They referred to individual routes or regions. For example, the road to Samarkand, the caravan route to Cathay. But historians later recognized these routes had once formed an integrated system of exchange and romanticized it under one name. The fact that no one in Marco Polo's time called it the Silk Road emphasizes that it was a modern historical construct, a useful one to be sure, capturing the spirit of that long era of Eurasian trade. Though the caravans no longer ran in regular fashion, the legacy of the Silk Road was indelible. The genetic, cultural, and economic impacts remained. Central Asia's peoples themselves, such as the Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Uzbeks, Tajiks, and others, are a tapestry reflecting millennia of mixing. You can see in their features and hear in their languages echoes of the migrations and mixtures facilitated by the Silk Road. Whole communities that existed because of Silk Road trade left their mark. For example, the Sogdian influence on later Central Asian culture, or the presence of Jewish communities in China, like Kaifeng's Jews, who likely arrived via silk routes. Cuisines were transformed. Imagine Italian food without pasta noodles brought from China, according to legend, or without cinnamon and pepper. Imagine Chinese food without garlic, grapes, or walnuts, all old imports. Technologies like paper-making, printing, and gunpowder changed societies worldwide, and they all traveled along the Silk Road in one direction or another. Art and literature bore Silk Road imprints long after the routes died down. For example, the Persian epic Shahnameh contains references to Chinese craftsmen. The blue and white ceramics perfected in Ming China became coveted globally. Renaissance art in Europe, in turn, began depicting oriental carpets and silk garments that had come via earlier trade. The Silk Road might have closed, but the world it had knit together was forever changed. In modern times, the Silk Road has taken on symbolic meaning as a reminder of our interconnected past. Scholars in the 19th-20th centuries resurrected interest in these routes, excavating sites like Dunhuang and uncovering thousands of ancient documents and artworks that revealed the vibrancy of Silk Road life. In the 21st century, the idea of the Silk Road has even been invoked in international diplomacy and development. China's recent massive infrastructure project, the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, explicitly evokes the Silk Road in striving to link Asia with Europe and Africa through new networks of trade and transportation. This new Silk Road aims to recreate in modern form the East-West exchange of old, albeit with highways, railways, and sea lanes instead of camel tracks. Meanwhile, UNESCO has recognized the Silk Road's value to World Heritage, designating portions of the route as World Heritage Sites. For example, the Chang'an-Tian Shan corridor from Xi'an through the Tian Shan Mountains was listed in 2014, and the Zarafshan-Karakum corridor through Central Asia in 2023. These efforts underline the significance of the Silk Road in human history. Even in popular culture and imagination, the Silk Road endures as a symbol of exotic travel and cross-cultural encounter. In a way, whenever you see East and West blending, be it in art, food, or ideas, you are witnessing an echo of the Silk Road. The route may no longer appear on modern maps as a continuous line, but its spirit survives in our globalized world. Every international trade route, every cultural festival where nations exchange traditions, every backpacker following Marco Polo's footsteps across Asia, all pay quiet homage to the trail blazed by those ancient caravans. The story of the Silk Road is thus a tale with no definitive end. It lives on in the cities it once enriched, in the religions that spread, in the technologies that transformed civilizations, and in the very notion that people separated by vast distances can be connected through exchange, from the lonely dunes of Dunhuang to the busy streets of Istanbul. The Silk Road's legacy is woven into the fabric of countless societies. It reminds us that the desire to explore, trade, and communicate is as old as civilization itself. And though the means have changed, camels giving way to container ships and jet planes, the fundamental exchange of goods and ideas between different cultures continues to shape our world, just as it did in the days when a caravan laden with silk set out from Chang'an and opened up the world. In the end, the Silk Road stands as more than a historical trade route. It is a symbol of human interconnectedness. It represents the bridges built between diverse peoples, bridges of commerce, curiosity, and friendship. Its twists and turns saw the dawn of globalization in the ancient world. And its story, peopled by adventurous traders, visionary monks, wise emperors, and fierce warriors, remains one of the most captivating narratives in history, a testament to how journeys can change the world. The Silk Road's legacy and symbolic significance endure today as a reminder that East and West, and all lands in between, have long been linked in a shared human journey. It is a story that continues to inspire and to caution, showing us the heights of cultural fluorescence and the perils of forgetting our connections. The Silk Road's tale, like the route itself, winds on a road not of silk, but of memory and hope, stretching across the continents and ages.